Today's Legal on 4 problems in probate court. Recently, a Phoenix newspaper dedicated its front page to horror stories, if you will, from probate up in Phoenix. Family members losing control, attorneys and judges running amok, huge amounts of money wasted. So should you be concerned about this? We have our legal affairs contributor Craig Wisnom joining us now, and you say don't be too worried.
No, for most people, they're not going to get anywhere close to these type of horror stories that the Arizona Republic, highlighted a few weeks ago. But people should be aware of what's at issue and know what it means.
And I've heard of cases being in probate for years, and that's obviously a worst case scenario. You don't want to go through and drag through details and court and all of that for years. Generally
not. And there are ways to avoid probate, but just to clear things up, the probate court not only handles what we might think of as probate, which is someone's estate after they die, but anyone who needs a guardian because they can't make decisions for themselves anymore, or a conservator because they can't take care of their money anymore, or they're too young, or they have some sort of inability to manage it.
Okay, so you said there are ways to avoid probate. Let's start there. I mean, how can you avoid it in the first place?
Well,
that would be great.
You can certainly try. And to avoid probate at death, people can go through techniques like a revocable trust, beneficiary designations, planning with
These are documents
accounts
that you get done?
Exactly. Normally they're things an attorney would prepare, and they can advise you on the cost and benefits of
what
avoiding.
What is the typical cost to do something like that?
Well, to do something like a trust, it's normally in the area of a couple $1,000s, or wills might be somewhere in the area of about half that.
How often do you have to redo them or change them?
Generally not completely very often at all, but maybe every 5 years or so you might need a tune-up.
Okay. Say you don't. And then you end up in a situation where guardianship must be decided or there is a death. Then what? I mean, hopefully somebody's drafted a really good will and...
Well, it depends. It always depends on the legal system. First of all, the documents can make things much easier. So even if the court process becomes involved at some point after death or during incapacity, if someone's got a will that clearly says, I want this person in charge of my estate and this is how I want it distributed, or you have a document saying, if I need a guardian, this is who I want to be that person, that makes things easier and it makes the court process easier. So that's the best thing you can do. You might want to look at whether it's necessary to try to set up documents to avoid probate, but even if you're not going quite that well, have a will, have powers of attorney, have these things planned out, because that makes it easier even if the court gets involved.
Are there circumstances where if you say, here's my wish, that would be trumped?
Normally not. No, normally the courts respect your wishes. And the fact is, even in the situations where, certainly where you plan for things in your documents, sometimes where you even don't, but your family is in agreement and there aren't people fighting, you're not going to get into these horror story situations.
I've heard of cases, though, where people anticipate that there will be arguing and they write clauses in.
They can certainly do that.
To say, hey, if there's arguing, X, Y, Z.
Exactly, and you can do that. And guess what? It may work or it may not, depending on how it's written in the court, how the court feels about it. But so most of the time, if a family or the beneficiaries involved are all in agreement, or even if they're relatively reasonable about disagreements they have, you don't get into these consuming horror stories where things go on for years and all the money gets spent in litigation and attorney's fees and fiduciary fees. But it's something you need to be aware of. If you're in a situation where it looks like there might be conflict, you've got to realize how expensive and difficult and messy it can be.
Yeah, I mean, how many, say you're in for years, and how costly is that for you when you find yourself?
When you're involved in that type of thing, it can be thousands and thousands and even hundreds of thousands of dollars that go to fees. Whereas if everything goes in agreeable fashion and there's not much controversy, it's normally a pretty modest amount.
All right.
So it all normally comes down to whether people are fighting and whether people are doing the right thing.
Can't we all just get along?
Absolutely.
Craig, thanks so much as always.